Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my most anticipated horror films of the year, and that is The Black Phone, directed by Scott Derrickson, starring Mason Thames, Madeleine McGraw, and of course Ethan Hawke as the Grabber. And I had heard such great things about this movie, about 6 months ago when it premiered at a film festival late last year. And of course, it was at CinemaCon and the 100% Rotten Tomatoes. And of course, it was supposed to be in February and then was delayed till this month. And so I had built this movie up in my mind so much that I couldn't wait to see it. And so this will be a spoiler review of my thoughts on this film because I have a lot to talk about. I've seen it twice now because I really wanted to wrap my brain around a couple things of this film. And so if you have not seen it, definitely go check it out. It's a great horror film, and come back and watch this review. But that being said, we're going to get into my negatives first about this film because there were a couple things after first watch that I wasn't quite sure about. Some things that, I think this movie was a little bit overhyped for me in some ways. Not saying that this is a bad movie. I really, really like this movie. It is a phenomenal horror movie. But there's a couple things that I was expecting out of this movie that I didn't get. And one of those things was in terms of Ethan Hawke's character as the Grabber. And I get what they're doing with this film. They're really presenting it from Finney's perspective of him not knowing things about the Grabber. And you don't really get any depth with the Grabber. He's kind of, I don't want to say he's one note, because that one note that he plays it very well. He's creepy, his design is great, the mask where he's able to emote his different emotions behind this mask by switching out different pieces. He can switch the smile to a frown, he can take off the top piece or the bottom piece in order to see different emotions that he can have at any given moment, and you really never see Ethan Hawke's face until the end of the movie, and I thought all those aspects of how they presented this new horror villain was quite brilliant. The only problem is Sinister does a great job at kind of diving deep into Bagul and how he gets his victims and why he gets his victims in this ritualistic way that he is able to lure these people in and how everything works. And yes, that film Sinister kind of struggles a little bit with exposition, but that being said, it was such a great journey to go through to kind of dive into how these things work. And in this movie, you don't get any of the how or why. You just get, okay, this kid was taken by this creepy ass guy and now he's stuck in this basement and he has to get out. And from that character's perspective, that is great. That is where all the depth is. I just was expecting a little bit more from the Grabber. Not to say that he wasn't scary or anything, because he definitely was. I just thought there was so much opportunity to dive into some of the little hints that they give at his characterization, which is, he is said to be able to hear the phone ringing. Why can he hear it? Is there something special about Finney and about the Grabber? I wanted to know more about him. And again, on those lines, the brother, played by James Ransom, I liked his performance a lot in Sinister. I really liked his deputy character. He was one of the bright, shining spots of that film because he's so entertaining to watch in it. In this movie, he has some funny lines. The cocaine snorting on the table in front of the cops, that was pretty funny. There's some good moments with this character. But again, there's not much kind of explained about this family dynamic that these two brothers have, and he's just kind of there to die in the end of the movie to have a body count, because the body count in this movie, of course, there's the 5 victims of the previous kids, but the only one you see on screen is the brother, even though he really played no role. He didn't help Finney in any way like all the other victims did. He just, he opened the door, but the Grabber would have opened the door anyway. He served no purpose to the story, and especially to Ethan Hawke's characterization, and I think that is my biggest flaw with the film. Now, that being said, let's talk about the things I loved about this film, because there is a lot to love. And let's first talk about Mason Thames as Finney and his journey in this movie. I loved his character. He was so endearing, and you just rooted so much for him, and you wanted him to get out of this situation so much, and he was such a great performer. I think this is his first movie, and what a debut from a child actor. He was so engaging in this film. And at the beginning of the movie, he's a very, sought after kid for bullying. He was beat up by, this one kid before, and his friend Robin is able to beat up that kid, and they had this great relationship between him and Robin of Finney being bullied by these kids, and Robin is able to kind of hold them back to really pick on him, and just having some sort of barrier, some safety barrier at his school where he can count on him to, stand up for him, because he's not able to stand up for himself. And once Robin is taken, all that goes away, and they spend the first 30 minutes of this movie before Finney gets kidnapped to kind of develop his character and to kind of show his relationship with Robin, with the people in his school, with his status in terms of popularity, in terms of how he was bullied, and of course his relationship with his sister and with his father, which was one of the most difficult things to watch. The first 30 minutes of this movie was brutal, and not the ways that you would think of when you watch the trailer for this film, because this is all before he gets kidnapped. His father is very abusive. His father ends up beating his sister at one point at the beginning of this movie. That is definitely the most difficult scene to watch in this film. And that bond that him and his sister has is so strongly set up in this film because they really only have each other. His dad is truly a mess. He's a terrible person, but they're stuck with each other. They have to have each other. And the great part about Gwen and Finney's characterization is you know that when they're together, they have each other's backs and they'll do anything for each other. And that is such a great relationship. When Gwen runs up with the rock and smacks that one kid in the face when they're beating up Finney, I love that. She was such a great character. And again, with this beginning of the movie, setting up these characters, Gwen was such a great character to introduce in this movie because I love the abilities that she has and the connection that has with their mother, you know, having these visions of seeing things that weren't really there, having these dreams that ended up leading her to take her own life, and the father kind of resenting that and wanting Gwen to not go down that path and taking this really abusive and drunken way about that. But to have her so dedicated to find Finney because when he is taken, she's now having dreams about Finney specifically rather than just the other victims of the grabber. And this, you know, family dynamic is so important to the film because it really makes you root for Finney and for Gwen to get Finney out of this situation. And one of my favorite sequences of this movie is when, after Finney is taken, he's put in this basement, he's starting to hear the phone ring, the black phone on the wall that is completely disconnected. It should not work. But like I said, you know, it rings and he hears it and he's able to speak to the victims, the past victims of the grabber. And this was brilliant in terms of a writing standpoint because all these things that these other victims have tried that have failed doing these things, Finney tries, kind of explores these different ideas, different ways to get out, and taking all these different, I guess, tips of advice that all these other kids has gone through and applies it to his own attempts to escape. And all of them failed because all these kids failed in this aspect in the past, especially the one sequence where Finney goes out of the room to play the naughty boy game. You have the grabber sleeping on the chair and he has to do his combination lock to be able to get out the door. That was one of the most intense sequences in this movie. But of course, all these attempts fail. And at the end of the movie, once you have, you know, Finney have one more conversation with Robin and having that connection that they set up at the beginning of the movie and him telling him that he has to finally stand up for himself and this is the situation that he was talking about, that was great characterization and great character arc for Finney's character in this movie. And by the end, Finney has to apply all the different things, you know, the rope that he found from that one kid, and of course, you know, the fighting with the phone from Robin, and digging the hole from, I think it was Bruce's character, and then of course, you know, breaking into the thing to get into the freezer to find the meat that he uses for the dog. All these different aspects, everything that these characters have Finney try to do throughout the movie is applied in some way in terms of his escape and him taking down the grabber, which is such a great way to tie it all together and to show that Finney has really gone to the next level and he has defended himself. Yes, he could take a punch, but now he can just defend himself on his own. He doesn't need somebody else to stand up for him. He can do it by himself, and that was so great to see. And all the while, everything outside of this room, where a lot of other films that are like this kind of struggle with having the outside source of this pain kind of living up to the interest of the audience in terms of, you know, the actual kidnapping stuff. And of course, Gwen, being the character that she is, having these creepy dreams that are ripped straight out of Sinister, with the style of it, with the directing of it, with the sound design specifically, is so great. There was a great needle drop in one of these dream sequences that I absolutely loved. There was so many great things happening outside of the grabber's basement, and with Gwen trying to find this place. And when she does find it, when she does get the cop characters, who are not complete imbeciles, these cop characters actually believe that these dreams that Gwen has is actually going to be helpful, which was kind of a surprise. Usually cop characters in movies like this are absolute buffoons, but no, they were actually pretty smart in this movie by trusting Gwen and by letting Gwen kind of lead them to the right place. And once they find each other, once Gwen and Finney hug each other at the end of this film after he's escaped, after they found the house across the street with all the bodies, it was such a satisfying ending. And like I said, this is such a great horror film. I just wish that, for one, Max's character and the characterization for the grabber had a little bit more depth to it. But that being said, everything else about this film was just really, really solid, and it is such a great time at the theater if you love horror movies. It is very scary, it's very intense, and it was just everything I wanted, almost everything I wanted from this film. And honestly, now I want a third film in the Sinister Black Phone Ethan Hawke and Scott Derrickson, James Ransone trilogy that they're doing. Give me a Cornetto trilogy with these three people. I would love to see them do another horror movie in this vein, because Scott Derrickson is a very strong talent. I'm glad that he, wasn't able to do Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so he can do this passion project of his and go all out on it, because it clearly paid off. So what did you guys think of The Black Phone, and how would you rank it up against Sinister and Scott Derrickson's other films? I'm definitely curious to hear that in the comments down below. And of course, if you like this review, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I just talked about the Obi-Wan season finale, and of course, I'll be talking about Miss Marvel once that wraps up, and every movie that comes out later on. I'll watch Elvis eventually. I might do a review for it. And of course, I believe next week is Minions. I might watch Minions. I don't know. I don't want to, but I might. So thanks everyone for watching this review, and I hope to see you all in my next one.